So one of the things that actually changed for us to kind of get back in line was the civil rights movements and its influence. So it says here the civil rights movements redefined the role of fathers, highlighting their importance in the family and what? And the community. Okay. I remember going down south, and this was probably in the 80s, 90s, early 90s. And my grandparents, they didn't even lock their doors. Okay, so we're going down south, and they would call it going to town if they wanted to go to the store because, again, the store is so far away. It wasn't like, you in the city and you can walk down to the end of the block. You had to go 20, 30 miles. And when they would leave, they'd say, "Hey, Miss Jones, I'm going to town. You need something? Watch the house while I'm gone." And that was it. But they never locked their doors. I don't recall them putting locks on that home until probably around the early 2000s because there wasn't anything going on. You had that family community that was put together like a small village. My grandparents, there was a guy at the end of, they stayed on the dirt road because they farmed. There was a guy at the end of the road, and his family had moved away, older guy. Well, what they did is she made sure she sent food down every time that she cooked back then. They call it supper. When she cooked supper, they would send the food down to the end of the road, which was probably about half a mile down. So the children had to walk down to the road and give them food. An older gentleman, and he had, one child, but nobody was there. Well, that was part of taking care of that community. You making sure no one went without. Okay. And in turn, they did it just because that's what you do. But it turned out later on when he passed on, he left them 40 acres of land. They had no idea. But that's the part of the family and taking care of each other. So we look at the family unity. So at that time, activists emphasized the significance of family unity, encouraging strong bonds among family during the movement. So in the civil rights era, families came together. Okay. And most of that was, most of the men in the family, they were out meeting with other men who had the same thoughts, trying to help out. When the boycott happened, everybody was there. But trust me, there were when you look at everything, any pictures, there are men standing on the front line. Those are fathers that are there that were picking up those roles and just showing that, hey, we're going to do something. It's our role to do that. Okay, so we talk about leadership roles. So it says the movement also called for fathers to take that leadership role, fostering growth and empowerment within their families. And that's what you saw. Um, I just recall, and that was a little bit before my time, but everything that my parents talked about, and I hear the elders talk about how everyone was together during that time. It didn't matter where you stayed, what it was, people came together during the civil rights movement. And mainly that was fathers being leaders in their home. And they did what? They brought their family with them. That's why you would see some children out, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. All right. So we're going to also go into the challenges faced by fathers. This is kind of dear to me because um, it's something that you hate to see people go through, but we understand it's the cards that we dealt. Um, so we're going to talk about systemic racism and discrimination. So that impact in employment. So it says systemic racism creates significant barriers for fathers in securing employment and career advancement opportunities. So I pulled this data from Fred, um, and it says Black unemployment rate as of April of 2025 is 6.3%. That's kind of screwed a little bit. So it normally hovers between that 25 to 40%. And the reason that is, and you have to look at it for what it is, numbers can change, is they can only count you into unemployment if you're filling out the application for it. Once you fill out the application, you're into that number. Now you only get so many weeks of unemployment. So when your unemployment ends, you're no longer counted into that number. So you have those that never apply, that don't have jobs. You have those that applied and the unemployment benefits have run out that don't have jobs. So that's why that number is higher than what they normally report. They're only reporting data as those who actually apply for unemployment benefits. Um, and so now to talk about those that have been declined for unemployment benefits. So when you look at that, it does put a weight on the fathers because again, we want to be what providers. We want to do what we're supposed to do. Okay. Challenges in parenting. So systemic racism leads to limited opportunities. Okay. Discrimination can affect fathers' parenting experiences, impact their ability to provide for their families effectively. Now, this is where the queens come in. So, most men are considered to be threats in the employment field. So, what transition was women, civil rights wasn't just for people of color, you had women whether it be Caucasian and people of color, now be able to go to school, get jobs, etc. And because there were not threats in the community, then what happened? They were able to kind of move and bring money in. So that's part of that change in the role that you see that's evolving because you have women that basically get educated, go out into the workforce. They're not seen as a threat as much, and they can kind of move a little bit better. Are they discriminated against? Absolutely, just because they're female. We kind of look at that just from the last presidential election. Had nothing to do with credentials, et cetera, et cetera. It had to do with we're going to go ahead and discriminate because she's a woman. So fathers' roles have changed due to racism and discrimination. And but again, we still keep moving. Okay. This is another big one that impacts fathers as we try to lead our families. Incarceration rates, okay, and legal challenges. So I pulled these particular statistics as well, and it's from the Federal Bureau of Prisons. So what they say there is that 90% of all inmates are males. On top of that, 38% of those are so-called Black folks that's there in the system. So when you look at the small number of the population that you are, and then you almost have 40% of males in prison, then of course that's going to pose a challenge for fatherhood. Okay. And we're looking at, was our father before I went in? How does the family operate that I'm born? And that whole dynamic on how it works. So these are challenges that we have as being fathers. The second one here says separated from the children. So you look at legal issues that often led fathers to separate from the children, which can have a lasting effect on the child's life. So when you're in that system and you're separated, then you cannot be that spiritual leader as you want to be. Okay. So it disrupts the whole family dynamic. And it also brings in emotional challenges for fathers and children alike. And just say the family in whole, because I talked about it. If someone's incarcerated and now you have the mothers there, then she has to take on that role to kind of supplement. So being a father and developing this strong sense of protector, provider, there's some challenges that we face, but we also just have to understand there's a community out there we have to cling to overcome. And is all of it our fault? Absolutely not, because we're talking about these particular issues here. Okay. All right.